Derek Holt didn't walk toward her. He walked at her, both hands spread wide like he was stopping traffic. "Whoa, whoa, whoa." He said it with a smile, the kind that isn't one. "Sweetheart, I don't know what you were told, but we don't do walk-ins off the street here. Especially not." His eyes moved from her paint-stained jeans to her canvas bag to her face, and he didn't finish the sentence, because he didn't need to. The lobby understood the sentence. "Looking like that?" Someone laughed. A short sound quickly swallowed. A man near the window raised his phone. "Community services for folks like you is 2 blocks west on Peachtree. They'll take care of you over there, honey. That's more your speed." She didn't move. He took that as an invitation to continue. He glanced back at the lobby, at the woman in pearls, at the man in the charcoal suit, and his smile widened, performing now feeding off the audience. "Come on now, don't make this difficult. You're making the other clients uncomfortable. I think we both know you don't belong in a place like this." Still she didn't move. Still she didn't speak. So he leaned in. Lowered his voice just enough to make it feel private, just enough to make it feel like a warning. "Listen, I'm going to say this nicely because that's the kind of man I am. A black girl in dirty clothes walking into my bank uninvited is not a client. It's a problem, and I don't do problems on Tuesday mornings." The woman in pearls looked away. The man with the phone didn't. His thumb was already moving. Nobody said a word in her defense. Not one person in that lobby stood up, in that. Nobody knew what was inside that canvas bag. Nobody knew whose portrait was hanging on the east wall of that very building. And nobody, not Derek Holt, not the man with the phone, not a single person on that marble floor understood what was about to happen to all of them. Don't go anywhere. This story goes somewhere none of them saw coming. Drop your city and your local time in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you're watching this. And if you're not subscribed yet, do it before the next part. You will not want to miss what she does next. The morning had started the way most of Zara Coleman's mornings started. With paint. Not metaphorically, literally. She had been awake since 5:15, standing barefoot on a drop cloth in her studio apartment on the east side of Atlanta, finishing the lower third of a commission she owed a restaurant owner in Decatur by Friday. The mural was 12 feet wide and depicted a Georgia peach orchard in late summer amber light, heavy branches, red clay earth. She had been working on it in sections for 3 weeks. This morning she was doing the roots. She painted roots this way her grandmother taught her to. From the bottom up, starting in the dark. The apartment smelled of linseed oil and coffee, and faintly of the cedar sachets her grandmother used to keep in every closet of every place she ever lived. Claudette Coleman had been gone for 18 months. The cedar smell had not gone with her. Zara had stopped trying to figure out whether that was a comfort or a haunting. She had decided it was both. She worked until 7:45. Then she set down the brush, poured a second cup of coffee, and sat at her kitchen table with a manila folder she had looked at so many times the edges had gone soft. Inside the folder, a letter from her attorney, Vivian Okafor, a notarized copy of her grandmother's probate order. A document printed on cream-colored legal paper with a seal at the top that read, "Meridian First Bank Founding Charter and Governing Instrument, 1994. And beneath that, a 2-page amendment dated April 2019, signed in the firm hand of Claudette Coleman and countersigned by a man named Preston Ashby, who was at the time of signing and still today the CEO of Meridian First Bank. Zara had read the amendment 11 times. She knew what it said. She needed to read it once more. It said that any direct heir of either founding partner retained the right to appear in person at the branch of record during the 30-day window following the bank's 30th anniversary and invoke a formal ownership verification. No advance notice required. No legal department processing period permitted. presence and documentation were sufficient. Today was the 9th day of that 30-day window. Zara closed the folder. She looked at the clock. She looked at her paint-stained jeans. She looked at the clean clothes hanging on the back of her bedroom door. A blazer, dark trousers, a white shirt she had pressed the night before. She stood up. She walked toward the bedroom. She stood in the doorway for a long moment. Then she walked back to the kitchen. She picked up the canvas bag from the chair. She put the manila folder inside it. She pulled on her paint-stained jacket, the one with the fraying strap on the left shoulder that she kept meaning to fix, and she picked up her keys. She thought about what her grandmother told her, once sitting at this same table in the same kitchen light. Claudette used to say that dignity is not a dress code. Her mother had told her years before her mother was gone, and years before Claudette was gone, and years before Zara was the last Coleman standing. Your grandma walked into rooms that didn't want her in them her whole life. She never once dressed for their comfort. She dressed for her own. Zara looked at her reflection in the dark window above the sink. Paint on her forearm. Paint on her collar. Paint in the crease of her left thumb where she always forgot to wash. She picked up the bag. She walked out the door. The drive downtown took 9 minutes. She found a parking spot on Forsyth Street, 1 block north of the branch. She sat in the car for a moment, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be still before it started. She had learned that from Vivian. Always be still before it starts. You can't take stillness with you once you're in the room. You have to bring it. She got out of the car. She walked south. Meridian First Bank occupied the ground floor of a 7-story building on the corner of Forsyth and Marietta in the heart of downtown Atlanta. The building was faced in Georgia marble, pale gray, almost white in direct sunlight. The doors were brass and glass. The name of the bank was etched above the entrance in letters 3 inches high. Zara had been inside this building exactly once before. She was 9 years old. Her grandmother had brought her on a Saturday morning, the branch closed and quiet, and walked her through the empty lobby and shown her the portrait on the east wall. The portrait of a woman at a desk, pen in hand, looking directly at the painter with an expression that was not quite a smile, and was not quite a challenge, and was somehow both. "That's me," Claudette had said. "Not proudly, simply, the way you point out a fact." "Why is it here?" Zara had asked. "Because I built it," Claudette said. "And when you build something, you put your name on it, so people remember who was here." Zara stood on the sidewalk outside the brass and glass doors at 10:08 in the morning and looked at the building her grandmother built. Then she pushed through the door with both hands. The lobby was cool and precisely lit and smelled of something that was trying to be neutral and almost was. Marble floors, brass fittings, a row of upholstered chairs along the east wall, 3 teller windows, a glass-walled office to the left, with a nameplate visible from the entrance, Derek Holt, branch manager, and on the east wall, in a frame that had been there for 30 years, the portrait of a woman with a pen in her hand. Zara looked at it, just for a second. Then a voice cut across the lobby like a hand placed flat on a table. "Whoa, whoa, whoa!" Derek Holt had been branch manager of Meridian First for 6 years. In those 6 years, he had developed what he considered a reliable instinct for the lobby. He knew within 30 seconds of a person walking through the brass doors whether they were a client, a prospect, or a problem. He had built this instinct the way most instincts are built, not from data, not from training, but from assumption, layered over assumption, until it felt like knowledge. He looked at the woman in the paint-stained jeans and the fraying canvas bag, and he made his assessment in under 10 seconds. He was wrong in every particular. He would not know that for another 3 hours. He crossed the lobby in 8 strides, both hands raised, and performed the scene that would later be viewed 380,000 times on a platform he barely used. He said what he said. He smiled the way he smiled. The lobby responded the way lobbies respond when a man in a good suit signals to a room full of people that a certain person does not belong, and the room decides, collectively to agree. When it was over, when the last word had landed, and the man with the phone had lowered it slightly, satisfied, Zara Coleman looked at Derek Holt with an expression he could not fully read. It was not anger. It was not embarrassment. It was something steadier than either. She said, "I'd like to speak with someone about a charter matter." Holt blinked. He had expected her to leave. Most people left. "I'm sorry." "A charter matter," she repeated. "I have documentation. I'd like to speak with the branch manager or a designated trust officer." "I'm the branch manager." "Then I'd like to speak with you." Holt recovered. He straightened. He shifted from performance into procedure, which was a different kind of performance. "Charter matters require an advance filing through our external legal portal. There's no same-day process for this type of inquiry. I'd suggest I have the documentation with me." She reached into the canvas bag and produced the manila folder. She held it out. He did not take it. "Ma'am, I understand you feel you have documentation, but our process exists for a reason. You'll need to submit through the portal, and once legal reviews the filing, someone will be in contact within 5 to 7 business days. 5 to 7 business days puts us outside the verification window. A pause. Small. Almost invisible. What verification window? She looked at him steadily. The one written into the founding charter. The 30-day window following the bank's 30th anniversary. Today is day 9. Something moved behind Holt's eyes. Not recognition, not yet. Something more like the first faint awareness that a conversation is going somewhere he did not plan for. He did not show it. Show. He had spent 6 years learning not to show things in the lobby. "I'm going to need to consult with our legal department before we can proceed with any charter-related discussion. That process takes—" "I understand you'd like to consult legal," Zara said. "In the meantime, I'll wait." She turned. She walked to the row of upholstered chairs along the east wall, directly beneath the portrait of Claudette Coleman, and she sat down. She placed the canvas bag on her lap. She folded her hands on top of it. She did not open her phone. She did not look around. She looked straight ahead at the teller windows, at the brass fittings at the lobby her grandmother built. Holt stood in the center of the floor for a moment. Then he turned and walked back to his glass office. He closed the door behind him, which he rarely did before noon. 35 minutes passed. Clients came and went. A woman with a checkbook, a man in a delivery uniform, 2 young professionals in matching athleisure who were quickly and warmly directed to the new accounts window by a receptionist who did not ask them a single qualifying question. Nobody called Zara's name. Nobody brought her water. Nobody acknowledged that she was sitting there at all except for the security guard, a young man named Terrence, who approached her at the 20-minute mark, uncomfortable in the particular way of someone following an instruction he didn't give himself. "Ma'am, have you been helped?" "Not yet," she said. He stood nearby for a moment. He didn't ask her to leave. He just stood nearby, which was its own kind of message. Tyler Voss was in the 3rd chair from the end, waiting for a 10:30 appointment with the small business lending department. He was 33. He had a startup, a good watch, and the easy confidence of someone who had never waited more than 5 minutes in a bank lobby in his life. He looked at Zara. He looked at the security guard standing near her. He looked at the phone in his hand. He made a comment, not to her, to the room, loud enough for 3 chairs in each direction to hear it. "I mean, you can't just plant yourself somewhere and expect people to work around you. Some folks really think the world owes them a seat at the table." He shook his head with the particular performance of a man who wants credit for his restraint. No appointment, no account, no reason to be here, just taking up space. The woman in pearls made a small sound of agreement. A man in a suit nodded without looking up from his newspaper. Raymond Cross, the janitor, was mopping near the east wall. He was 67 years old and had worked in this building for 19 years through 4 branch managers and 2 full lobby renovations. He looked at the woman sitting beneath the portrait. He looked at the portrait. He looked back at the woman. His mop slowed, then stopped. He stood very still for a moment, looking at the 2 faces, one in oil paint on canvas, one in profile below it, and something moved across his expression that was not quite recognition, and was not quite grief, and was both. He did not say anything. He pushed his cart slowly toward the service corridor. He disappeared through the door. At the 55-minute mark, Holt's office door opened. He crossed the lobby. He stopped in front of Zara. He held out a business card with a website printed on it. The portal address is on the card. Once you submit your filing legal will— That's not correct, Zara said. She reached into the canvas bag. She produced a second document, one Holt had never seen, one that had never needed to be produced until this moment, and she placed it on the armrest between them. Holt looked at it. His hands did not move. The document was 2 pages long. Cream-colored legal paper. A notary seal at the bottom of page 2, registered with Fulton County, Georgia. A signature on the right side of the last line that Holt recognized because it was his CEO's signature, and he had seen it on enough internal documents to know it on sight. He picked it up. He read it slowly. Or he appeared to read it. His eyes moved across the lines at the pace of reading, but something in his posture had shifted, and the shift said that he was no longer processing words. He was buying time. When he looked up, his face had rearranged itself into something that was trying to be authority and landing closer to caution. I'll need to verify the authenticity of this document. It's notarized, Zara said. The seal is registered with Fulton County. You can verify by phone in under 4 minutes. Our process still requires— Mr. Holt? Her voice did not rise. It did not sharpen. It stayed at the same level it had been all morning, even measured like a table that will not tip. I have been sitting in your lobby for 55 minutes. I have produced the original founding charter, the probate order, and a notarized amendment to that charter that your CEO co-signed in 2019. I am not asking you to make a decision. I am asking you to make a phone call. The lobby had gone the particular quiet that lobbies go when everyone has stopped pretending not to listen. Tyler Voss had put his phone down, not a way down, on his knee, face up, still recording. The woman in pearls had turned her head 3 inches toward the conversation. Monica Wren. The lone officer had appeared in the doorway of her office at the back of the floor. She stood there, with a coffee mug in her hand, and her eyes on Zara, and the expression of someone doing fast, private arithmetic. Holt took the document. He said he would make inquiries. He walked back toward his office, and this time he did not fully close the door, and through the gap Zara could see him standing at his desk, not at his computer, not on the phone, but just standing with the document in both hands and his back to the lobby. 40 seconds passed. Then Tyler Voss spoke. He had put the phone down, but he had not put away the performance. He looked around the chairs with the loose, comfortable ease of a man who has done this before, and found it well received. You know what I love about this city. He said it to no one specific, and therefore to everyone. You can walk into any building you want. Anybody can walk in anywhere. That's America, right? He paused just long enough. Doesn't mean you belong there. A man near the window made a short sound, not quite a laugh, just an exhalation that carried the shape of one. The woman in pearls looked at her phone. Not away from Voss, away from Zara, which was a different thing. Zara did not look at Voss. She looked at the east wall, at the portrait, at her grandmother's hands painted in oil resting on a desk, at her grandmother's eyes, looking directly out of the frame with an expression that said, "I know exactly what room I'm in." Do you? Voss wasn't finished. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, and dropped his voice to the register men use when they want to sound reasonable while saying something that isn't. "I'm just saying there's a process. There's a reason places like this have a process. You can't walk in off the street in whatever that is you're wearing and expect the whole operation to stop for you. It's not about anything else. It's just about respect. Respect." He said it with the full confidence of a man who had never once had to think about what the word cost. The security guard, Terence, shifted his weight. He looked at the floor. He did not speak. Sandra Cho, the teller at window 2, had stopped typing. Her hands were on the keyboard. They were not moving. And then Raymond Cross came back. He pushed his cart through the service corridor door and back into the lobby, and he did not go to the section he had been mopping. He went to the east wall. He positioned himself near the base of the portrait, adjusted something on his cart that did not need adjusting, and stood there not conspicuously, not performatively, just present. A body in a space that said, "I am not going anywhere either." Zara saw him. Their eyes met for less than a second. She looked back at the portrait. Holt emerged from his office at 11:03. He had made a call. His face had been reorganized into the specific blankness of a man who has received information he does not want and has decided his next move is to delay. "I've reached out to our legal department," he said. "Given the nature of what you're describing, this will require a formal review process. I can schedule you for an appointment next week with our—" "The window closes in 21 days, Zara said. "Our legal team will—" "Mr. Holt." She stood. She was not tall. She did not need to be. "I want to be very clear about something. I have been patient. I have been polite. I have followed every procedural suggestion you have made this morning, and I am going to remain here in this lobby for as long as it takes, because the document I have shown you grants me the right to be here and the right to be heard today." She reached into the canvas bag one more time. She produced a third document. This one had a different seal at the top. Not Fulton County, not Meridian First Bank, the seal of the Georgia Secretary of State's office. "This," she said, "is the registered ownership record, filed by my grandmother's estate attorney 14 months ago. It lists me by name as the beneficial owner of 49% of the founding shares of this institution." And she placed it on this chair beside her. "I'll wait," she said. "Take your time." The lobby did not move. Tyler Voss looked at the document from across the room. He couldn't read it from where he sat, but he could read the seal. And something in his face, not quite understanding, not quite alarm, shifted quietly in the direction of both. At the far end of the lobby, the elevator doors opened, and the person who stepped out changed everything. Irene Sato stepped out of the elevator at 11:07, carrying a leather portfolio and the particular composure of someone who had been in this building since before the carpet was installed. She was 61. She had been on the board of Meridian First Bank for 22 years. She had known Claudette Coleman for 26. She had been at the table in 1994 when the founding charter was signed, had watched Claudette's pen move across the bottom of the last page with the steady certainty of someone who had waited her whole life for that specific moment and was not going to rush it now that it had arrived. She was here for a routine quarterly review. She had not been expected until 11. She stepped off the elevator and turned toward the lobby and stopped. Not because of the document on the chair, not because of Holt standing in the center of the floor with the particular posture of a man who has been losing an argument for the past hour and knows it. not because of the unusual quiet that had settled over the marble and the brass and the upholstered chairs. She stopped because of the woman standing beneath the portrait on the east wall. Irene Sato looked at the portrait of Claudette Coleman, at the hands, at the eyes, at the expression that was not quite a smile and not quite a challenge, and was somehow both. Then she looked at the woman standing below it. The paint-stained jeans, the fraying canvas bag, the same hands, the same eyes, the same expression. The resemblance was not subtle. It had never been subtle. Zara had inherited her grandmother's face the way you inherit a house completely structurally down to the foundation. Irene crossed the lobby. She did not look at Holt. She did not look at the security guard or the tellers or the man in the third chair who was now sitting very still with his phone on his knee. She walked directly to Zara, and she said without preamble, without performance, "You're Claudette's granddaughter," not a question. "Yes, ma'am," Zara said. Irene looked at her for a long moment. Something moved across her face that was not quite grief and was not quite relief, and was the specific expression of someone who has been waiting 18 months for a thing to happen and has almost stopped believing it would. She turned to Holt. Her voice when it came was careful and precise, the voice of a woman who has spent decades in rooms where words have consequences and has learned to choose each one accordingly. "Has this woman been assisted?" Holt opened his mouth. He explained the process, the portal, the legal department review, the scheduling window, the derrick. One word. A door closing. The lobby heard it. Even Tyler Voss, in the third chair from the end, heard it, the specific authority, in a single syllable that doesn't come from a title or a volume level, but from the accumulated weight of being right in rooms for a very long time. Holt stopped talking. Irene held out her hand to Zara. Zara placed the manila folder in it. Irene opened it. She read the probate order. She read the charter amendment. She read the Georgia Secretary of State's registered ownership record. She read each document fully, without rushing turning pages, with the careful attention of someone for whom reading documents carefully is not a habit, but a discipline. When she finished, she closed the folder. She looked at Holt. "Pull the branch's ownership registry file. The physical one. Now." Something happened in Holt's face. Not defiance, he was beyond defiance. It was the expression of a man watching a door he thought was closed swing open and understanding that everything behind it is going to come out into the light, whether he is ready or not. He went to the back office. He was gone 4 minutes. He returned with a bound ledger, dark green cover brass clasp. The kind of physical record that exists because founding documents require physical records, and nobody has gotten around to changing that requirement in 30 years. He placed it on the counter. Irene opened it to the founding page. She placed it flat beside the probate order. She looked at the two documents side by side, the original ownership structure, as recorded in 1994, and the legal transfer of Claudette Coleman's stake to her sole surviving heir. She looked at the numbers for a long time without speaking. Sandra Cho at window 2 had stopped pretending to type. Her hands were in her lap. Raymond Cross had stopped pretending to clean. He stood at the east wall with his hands on the cart handle and his eyes on Irene Sato and the ledger. Monica Wren, in the doorway of her office, had taken one step back, which was not far enough, and she knew it. Irene closed the ledger. She placed her hand flat on the cover. She looked at Zara Coleman, at the paint on her forearm, at the fraying strap on her canvas bag, at the woman who had driven 9 minutes across Atlanta in her work clothes and sat for 55 minutes in a lobby that did not want her there, and had not moved, and had not flinched, and had not once raised her voice. "Zara Coleman," Irene said, and her voice was steady in the way that voices are steady when they are carrying something important and refuse to drop it. "You are by inheritance and by law the beneficial owner of 49% of the founding shares of this institution. That is, as of this morning, this branch's single largest individual equity position." The lobby heard it the way a room hears a window break, not loudly, but completely, the sound of something that cannot be unmade. Tyler Voss looked at his phone. He looked at Zara. He looked at the portrait above her head. He looked at the nameplate below the portrait that he had walked past every time he came into this branch for 3 years without once reading. Claudette Coleman, co-founder and equity partner, Meridian First Bank, 1994. His phone was still recording. Irene turned to Holt. She said 4 words. "Get Preston on the phone." Holt made the call from his glass office with the door open, which meant the lobby could see him, if not hear him. They watched him dial. They watched him wait. They watched his face when the line connected, the slight forward lean, the way his free hand moved to the edge of his desk and gripped it. The 2-second pause before he began speaking that said more than anything that came out of his mouth. He spoke for 4 minutes. He did not look at the lobby once. When he came back out, he addressed Irene, not Zara. "Mr. Ashby's office says he's in a strategic planning session through noon. His assistant is going to—" "I didn't ask for his assistant," Irene said. She had not moved from the counter. She had not put down the ledger. "I asked for Preston. They're going to pass him a message. Derek. The same single syllable, the same closed door. Call his cell." Holt went back to his office. This time he closed the door. Irene turned to Zara. She gestured toward the row of chairs along the east wall. Not the chairs in the waiting area where Zara had spent the last hour being invisible, but the chairs at the small conference table near the window, the ones reserved for premium clients, the ones that had never in the 6 years of Holt's management been offered to a person who walked in from the street without an appointment. "Sit down," Irene said, not unkindly. "This may take a few minutes. I want to look at something." Zara sat. She placed the canvas bag on the table. She folded her hands on top of it. She had been still all morning, and she remained still now, with the particular quality of stillness that is not passivity, but patience, the stillness of someone who knows that the work has already been done and is waiting for the room to catch up. Irene sat across from her. She opened the manila folder again. She was looking at the charter amendment, the 2019 document, the 2 pages on cream-colored paper with Preston Ashby's signature on the final line. She read it once more. Slowly. The way she had read it the first time, but now with a different question in mind. "Did you know he signed this?" Irene asked. She kept her eyes on the document. "My attorney told me," Zara said. "After the probate filing, she'd been in contact with his office." "And before today, had you spoken with him directly?" "No." Irene nodded. She turned the page. She looked at the date, April 14th, 2019. 4 years before Claudette died. 4 years before any of this became urgent. "Your grandmother was very deliberate," Irene said. It was not a compliment or an observation. It was the statement of a fact so well established it had become simply the texture of things, the same way you would say the building is marble or the river runs south. "I know," Zara said. She filed this amendment quietly. She didn't announce it to the board. She had Preston co-sign it, had it notarized, and had it registered with the state. Then she told me, just me, that she had done it. Irene paused. She said she wanted to make sure someone on the inside knew where it was, in case the outside took a long time. Zara looked at the older woman across the table. Something moved in her face. Not quite surprise, not quite grief. The particular expression of learning something about a person you thought you fully knew, and discovering there was a room you hadn't found yet. "She never told me," Zara said quietly. She knew you'd come when you were ready, Irene said. She said that specifically. Those words. The lobby around them had resumed a kind of surface motion, tellers processing transactions. The receptionist answering a call, but it was the motion of a room that is paying attention while pretending not to. Everyone within 30 feet of the conference table near the window had reduced their movements to the minimum required by their job descriptions. Monica Wren had retreated fully into her office. The door was not closed. The door was never fully closed on the main floor during business hours. It was a policy Holt had implemented 2 years ago for transparency, he had said. The irony of that was not lost on Sandra Cho, who had been watching Monica's office door from window 2 for the past 20 minutes. At 11:42, the front door opened. Vivian Okafor did not rush. She never rushed. She was 39 years old and had been Zara's attorney for 4 years, and had learned in the first month that the most important thing she could bring into any room was the impression that she had already been there. She was wearing a charcoal blazer and carrying a leather briefcase, and the expression of a woman who set a calendar reminder for this morning because she knew Zara and she knew institutions, and she understood that the intersection of those two things on a Tuesday morning in Atlanta was not something you left unattended. She crossed the lobby. She saw Irene Sato. She saw the ledger on the table. She saw the manila folder open to the charter amendment. She sat down beside Zara without speaking, placed her briefcase on the table, and looked at Irene. "How far are we?" she asked. "Ownership is confirmed," Irene said. "We're waiting for Preston." Vivian nodded. She opened her briefcase. She produced a document of her own, 4 pages, tabbed with a red exhibit sticker on the front cover. "Then we should talk," she said, "about the dormancy review." The table went very still. Irene looked at the document. She looked at Vivian. She looked at Zara. "What dormancy review?" she said. Vivian placed the 4-page document flat on the table and turned it so that Irene could read it without picking it up. It was a copy of an internal bank memorandum. The header read, "Meridian First Bank Office of Legal Affairs Internal Equity Review Notice." The date at the top was 14 months ago, 3 weeks after Claudette Coleman's estate attorney had filed the probate order with Fulton County. The subject line read, "Dormancy Review, Initiation, Uncontacted Beneficiary, Coleman Estate File." Irene read it without expression. She read it the way she had read everything this morning, fully carefully, without letting her face do anything her mind hadn't finished deciding yet. When she reached the bottom of the first page, she turned it. When she reached the bottom of the second, she stopped. She looked at the signature block on page 2. The memo had been authorized by 2 names. The first was a senior legal officer who, as Vivian would explain in a moment, had left the bank 8 months ago in what the internal announcement described as a voluntary departure to pursue other opportunities. The second name was Monica Wren. Irene set the page down. She did not look toward Monica's office. She had the discipline not to. But her hand flat on the table beside the memo, pressed down slightly, a small contained motion, the kind that happens when something needs somewhere to go, and there is nowhere appropriate for it to go yet. "Explain the dormancy review," she said to Vivian. Her voice was even. It was the evenness of someone applying significant effort to keep it that way. Vivian explained. Under Meridian, First Bank's internal bylaws that had been amended in 2016, 2 years after Claudette had last reviewed them, if a beneficial owner of founding shares failed to make contact with the institution within 12 months of a triggering event such as inheritance, the shares entered a dormancy review process. The dormancy review, once initiated, ran for 24 months. At the conclusion of that period, if the beneficiary had still not been reached, the board was permitted to restructure the dormant equity position through a process called administrative reallocation. Administrative reallocation? The phrase had been crafted, Vivian said carefully, To describe something much simpler in plain language, the shares would be redistributed among existing stakeholders. The dormancy review, Vivian continued, was initiated 14 months ago, 3 weeks after the probate filing. The initiating memo, which you are looking at, notes that a contact letter was sent to the beneficiary's last known address. Was it received? Irene asked. It was returned undelivered. The address on file was 4 years old. My client moved in 2019. And the follow-up, there was none. Vivian's voice did not editorialize. It did not need to. The memo notes the undelivered return and recommends initiating the dormancy review. No second contact attempt was made. No certified mail. No registered notice. No attempt to locate a current address through the estate attorney, whose name and contact information were on the probate filing that the bank's own legal department had already received. The table was completely still. Zara had heard all of this before Vivian had walked her through it 3 times in the past 2 weeks, preparing for today. She knew the sequence. She knew the numbers. She knew that the dormancy review window closed in 6 days, which was the specific reason today was today, and not a week from today. Knowing it and hearing it said aloud in the building where it happened were 2 different things. She kept her hands folded on the canvas bag. She kept her face level. She did not look at Monica Wren's office door. Irene turned to the 3rd page of the memo. She read. Her hand on the table pressed down again. Who else on the board knows about this? She asked. To my knowledge, Vivian said no one. The dormancy review is an administrative process. Under the amended bylaws, it does not require board notification until the reallocation phase, which would not begin until the review window closes. Which is in 6 days. Yes, Irene sat with that for a moment. 6 days. Zara had walked through the brass doors this morning with 6 days remaining on a clock that had been running for 14 months, without her knowledge, initiated by a memo signed by a loan officer who had glanced at her in the lobby an hour ago and kept walking. Outside the conference table's small radius of stillness, the lobby continued its surface motion. A client at window 1 counted out bills. The receptionist's phone rang twice and was answered. The elevator opened and closed on an empty car. And then at 12:07, the front door opened again. Marcus Bell was 41 years old and worked the Metro desk at the Atlanta Constitution Observer. He was not tall. He was not loud. He carried a notebook and a shoulder bag, and the particular unhurriedness of a reporter who has learned that rushing into a room changes what the room shows you. He had received a tip at 11:15 from a source he trusted completely. The tip had been 3 words. Go to Meridian. He came in. He looked at the lobby, at the quiet, that was not quite normal at the security guard standing near the east wall at Raymond Cross, and his cart positioned near the portrait at the conference table by the window, where 2 women and an older board member sat with documents spread between them. He found a chair near the entrance. He sat down. He did not approach anyone. He opened his notebook. He wrote the date and time at the top of the first page. Then he wrote 1 line beneath it, the way he always started, the way his first editor had taught him 20 years ago in a newsroom that no longer existed. What is this room trying not to say? He looked up. At 12:19, the front door opened a 3rd time. Preston Ashby walked in. His face, when his eyes found Zara at the conference table, was not the face of a man who was surprised. It was the face of a man who had been expecting this for 18 months and had spent every one of those months hoping it would happen and dreading that it might not. Preston Ashby was 52 years old and had run Meridian First Bank for 11 years. He had grown up in Savannah, the son of a postal worker and a home health aide, and had put himself through Morehouse on a combination of academic scholarships and weekend work at a hardware store where the owner paid him in cash and called him by his first name, which was more than most places did in those years. He had met Claudette Coleman at a banking conference in 1998 when he was 24, and she was 51, and she had looked at him across a panel discussion on community development lending and said afterward in the hallway, "You asked the only question in that room that mattered. Come work for me." He had, for 9 years. And when she stepped back from day-to-day operations in 2007 to focus on the legal work she had never fully left, she had recommended him to the board as her successor, with the same directness she brought to everything. "He's the best person for this. Don't complicate it." They had not complicated it. Preston crossed the lobby without stopping at the reception desk, without acknowledging Holt, who had emerged from his glass office at the sound of the door, and now stood in the center of the floor with the expression of a man who has run out of procedural options and is waiting to find out what comes next. He walked to the conference table. He pulled out the chair across from Zara and sat down. He placed his phone face down on the table. He looked at her. He did not look at her clothes. He did not look at the canvas bag. He looked at her face, at the eyes that were Claudette's eyes, and the hands that were Claudette's hands, and the stillness that was entirely her own. He said, "I should have found you myself. That's the truth of it, and I'm not going to dress it up." The table was quiet. Irene watched. Vivian watched. Zara watched. "When your grandmother died," Preston continued, "I knew about the amendment. I knew about the probate filing. I told myself the institution would handle the contact process correctly, and I didn't follow up to make sure it had. That was my failure. Not anyone else's. Mine." He paused. He looked at the dormancy review memo that was still open on the table in front of Irene. He looked at it for the long moment. "I didn't know about that," he said. Quietly. Precisely. Not as a defense, as a fact he was placing on the table alongside the other facts, asking no one to weigh it in his favor. "I'm not asking you to believe that changes anything. I'm telling you because it's true." "It doesn't change the memo," Vivian said. "No," Preston said. "It doesn't." He looked at Zara. "She told me you'd come when you were ready. That was the last real conversation we had 2 weeks before she died. She said..." He stopped, started again. "She said, don't rush her and don't lose her. I didn't rush, I lost." The lobby had gone very still. Marcus Bell near the entrance had his pen moving. He was not looking at his notebook. He was looking at the table. Raymond Cross stood at the east wall with his hands on the cart handle and did not move. Zara looked at Preston Ashby for a long moment. She looked at the man her grandmother had chosen, had trained, had trusted with the institution she built, the man who had signed the amendment 4 years ago, specifically to protect what was coming, and who had then, in the ordinary chaos of running an institution, let the machinery around him move without watching where it went. She said, "She trusted you." "Yes," he said. "That's not nothing." "No," he said. "It isn't. It's also not enough." "No," he said. "It isn't." The silence that followed was not hostile. It was the silence of 2 people who have both said the true thing and are sitting with the weight of it before deciding what comes next. What came next was Vivian. She turned to Preston with the precise, unhurried manner of someone who has been patient all morning because she knew this moment was coming and wanted to arrive at it cleanly. "The dormancy review window closes in 6 days, she said. "We need to formally halt the review document, the notification failure, and proceed with the ownership verification today. All 3, before close of business." Preston nodded. "Agreed. I'll also need a written acknowledgement from the bank that the undelivered contact letter was the result of an outdated address record and that no reasonable follow-up effort was made. You'll have it." And the memo. Vivian placed one finger on the document. I want to understand who authorized the dormancy review at the senior level. The legal officer whose name is on this memo no longer works here. I want to know if this originated with him or if the direction came from above. Preston looked at the memo. He looked at Monica Wren's name in the signature block. He looked toward her office door, still open, where Monica Wren was sitting at her desk, not looking at her computer. He said, "I'll find out." He stood. He straightened his jacket. He looked at Irene, who had not spoken in several minutes, who had been sitting with her hand flat on the ledger, and her face carrying the particular expression of a board member who has discovered that the institution she helped build has done something she will spend the next year making sure it cannot do again. "Convene an emergency session," he said to her. "This week." She nodded once. Preston looked at Zara one more time. "Your grandmother put her name on this building because she built it. So will you." He walked toward Monica Wren's office. The door was open. He went in. He closed it behind him. The lobby watched the closed door for a moment. Then it exhaled a collective, quiet exhale, the sound of a room releasing something it had been holding all morning. Tyler Voss looked at his phone. The video had 240,000 views. The comments were not what he had expected when he posted it. They had not been what he expected for quite some time. He looked at the portrait on the east wall, at the nameplate below it, at the woman at the conference table whose inheritance had just been formally acknowledged by the CEO of the institution her grandmother built. He put the phone in his pocket. He stood up. He walked toward the table. Tyler Voss stopped 3 feet from the conference table. He was 33 years old and had spent the morning performing for a lobby that had in the past 2 hours stopped being his audience. He had made comments that landed the way he expected them to land, and then watched in real time as the ground beneath those comments shifted and kept shifting until there was nothing left to stand on. He did not perform now. He stood at the edge of the conference table with his hands at his sides, and he said in the voice of someone who has spent an hour arriving at a sentence, "I posted a video this morning that I shouldn't have. I'm going to take it down. I'm sorry." He said it to the floor more than to the table. He did not dress it up. He did not explain it or qualify it or surround it with context that might soften its edges. He said it, and then he stood there and let it be what it was. Zara looked at him. She did not say anything immediately. She let the sentence exist in the room for a moment, not to punish him, not to perform her own composure, but because she had learned from her grandmother that the most important thing you can do with an apology is receive it at its actual weight, neither heavier nor lighter than it is. "Thank you," she said. He nodded. He left. The video came down at 12:31. By then it had 380,000 views. The screenshots remained on accounts Voss did not control in threads he could not reach on servers that did not care what he decided to do with his original upload. The story was already out. It had been out for 2 hours. It would continue to be out in ways that a single deletion could not reverse, which was its own kind of record. Marcus Bell, near the entrance, wrote something in his notebook. He did not look up. Inside Monica Wren's office, the conversation with Preston lasted 9 minutes. The lobby could not hear it. What the lobby could see through the glass wall was Monica's posture, the way she sat very still in her chair. Not the stillness of composure, but the stillness of someone who has been waiting a long time for a specific conversation, and now that it has arrived, does not know what to do with their hands. When Preston came out, his face carried the expression of a man who has learned something he suspected and finds the confirmation worse than the suspicion. He spoke briefly to Irene. 2 sentences. She listened. She nodded once the way she had been nodding all morning, a nod that said, "I understand. Proceed." He spoke briefly to Vivian. 1 sentence. She wrote something in her notebook. Then he returned to the conference table and sat back down across from Zara and told her what Monica Wren had told him. The dormancy review had not been Monica's idea. It had been suggested in a hallway verbally with no paper trail by the senior legal officer whose name appeared above hers on the memo. The suggestion had been framed as standard procedure for uncontacted beneficiaries, which it technically was under the 2016 bylaw amendment. Monica had written the memo. She had filed it. She had told herself it was administrative. She had not followed up on the undelivered letter because following up would have required acknowledging that the process was not in fact purely administrative. Did she know whose granddaughter the beneficiary was? Vivian asked. Preston was quiet for 3 seconds. She knew, he said. The table absorbed that. Zara looked at the surface of the conference table, at the grain of the wood, at the brass edge trim that ran along its perimeter. She thought about Monica Wren passing through the lobby 2 hours ago with a coffee mug in her hand, glancing at the woman in the paint-stained jeans, and keeping walking. She thought about what it costs to keep walking. She thought about the specific arithmetic a person does when they decide that a thing is not quite wrong enough to stop them. She did not speak for a moment. Then she said, "What happens to her?" Preston looked at her. "That depends on what you want." "I want the process to be fixed," Zara said. "I want it fixed so it can't be used this way again. Whatever happens to her individually, that's the institution's matter. I'm not here for that." Preston nodded slowly. It was a nod that carried something not quite respect, which was too simple, but the particular quality of attention a person gives when they are revising an assumption they didn't know they were making. Vivian opened her briefcase. She produced the ownership verification documents, the formal packet that would once signed and witnessed and notarized record Zara Coleman's 49% stake in Meridian First Bank as officially confirmed on this date, in this branch, in this building. She placed the packet on the table. She opened it to the signature page. She set a pen beside it. Preston signed first as CEO. His signature was the same one that appeared on the 2019 Charter Amendment, the same hand, the same practiced certainty. Irene signed as board witness. Her pen moved without hesitation. Vivian's notary stamp, she had brought it, because she always brought it, because she was. Vivian made a clean, precise sound as it sealed the page. Zara looked at the signature line with her name printed below it. She reached into the canvas bag. She took out one of the 2 pencils she kept there, a habit she had inherited from her grandmother, who had always kept pencils, who had said once that a pencil makes a mark that belongs to you, not to the instrument. She signed her name. In the blocky, unhurried printing of a woman who has spent years making marks on large surfaces and knows that the mark is only as good as the intention behind it. The paper made a clean, precise sound as Vivian slid the original into her briefcase. The lobby was quiet. Raymond Cross at the east wall looked at the portrait of Claudette Coleman. He looked at Zara. He did something he had not done in 19 years of working in this building. He put his hand over his chest briefly and bowed his head. Then he picked up his mop. He went back to work. Marcus Bell closed his notebook. He had everything he needed. He shouldered his bag and walked toward the door. He stopped at the east wall. He looked at the portrait for a moment, at the hands, the eyes, the expression that was not quite a smile. He looked at the nameplate. He wrote one more line in his notebook, standing there. Then he walked out through the brass and glass doors into the Atlanta afternoon. Derek Holt was placed on administrative leave before the end of the business day. The notification was delivered by email. He read it at his desk in the glass office. He read it twice. He closed his computer. He picked up his nameplate, Derek Holt, branch manager, and held it in both hands for a moment. He put it back down. He picked up his jacket. He walked out of the branch at 4:47 without speaking to anyone. The lobby watched him go. Marcus Bell's article ran on Thursday morning. The headline was quiet, in the way that the most honest headlines are quiet, not because they are understating the thing, but because the thing is large enough to speak for itself without decoration. Meridian First Bank confirms Coleman Air as 49% stakeholder after lobby incident draws scrutiny. 900 words. No photographs of Zara. She had not consented to photographs, and Marcus Bell did not publish photographs of people who had not consented. In a sidebar set in slightly larger type beside the main text, he printed 2 numbers and 1 sentence. The 2 numbers were these: the approximate value of Zara Coleman's inherited equity stake, drawn from the bank's most recent public filings, $31 million, and the number of days remaining in the dormancy review window when she walked through the brass doors, 6. The sentence read, "The institution's own administrative process, initiated 14 months ago after a contact letter was sent to an outdated address and returned undelivered without follow-up, would have begun redistributing those shares in less than a week." The sidebar was 4 lines long. The 4 lines were the whole story. The article was shared 47,000 times in the first 24 hours. The screenshots of Tyler Voss's video already circulating attached themselves to the article in the way that visual evidence attaches itself to written record, not illustrating it exactly, but rhyming with it. The comment sections across every platform where the story appeared were long and loud and repetitive in the specific way of comment sections when a story has touched something that a lot of people have been carrying for a long time without a place to put it. Vivian Okafor issued a single statement through her office. It was 1 paragraph. It said that her client was grateful for the support she had received, that the ownership verification had been completed correctly and completely, and that her client had no further comment at this time. It did not mention Derek Holt by name. It did not mention Monica Wren. It did not need to. Monica Wren resigned on Friday. She submitted her resignation by email, which was not unusual, and accompanied it with a letter handwritten 1 page addressed to Vivian Okafor's office. Vivian read it. She did not share it publicly. She filed it in Zara's case folder under a tab she labeled simply Correspondence. It was never quoted. It did not need to be. Holt's administrative review concluded 14 days later. He was not reinstated. The bank's internal findings were not made public in detail, which was standard. What was made public through a brief statement from Preston Ashby's office was that the review had been completed and that the bank was implementing new procedures for customer service at all branch locations effective immediately. The procedures were specific. They were listed on the bank's website in plain language, not legal language, which was itself a departure. Every customer with a ticketed queue number would be called in order logged by time, and the log would be available for review by branch managers and regional oversight. Customer service delays exceeding 15 minutes for any ticketed customer would trigger an automatic notification to a regional supervisor. No branch manager could unilaterally redirect a customer to an external process without documented justification reviewed by a second officer. The procedures were 3 paragraphs. They were the kind of 3 paragraphs that exist because something happened that made them necessary, and everyone reading them understood exactly what that something was. Irene Sato chaired an emergency board session the following week. The dormancy review bylaw was amended. Future dormancy reviews for founding share beneficiaries would require board-level authorization, 2 independent contact attempts by certified mail, and notification to the estate attorney of record before initiation. The amendment passed unanimously. It was noted in the minutes, without editorializing, that the original 2016 bylaw amendment, which had enabled the review, had been passed during a period when 2 founding-era board members had rotated off and 3 new members had joined. The minutes did not say what that sequence implied. The minutes did not need to. Preston Ashby commissioned a second portrait for the east wall of the Morrison Marietta branch. Same pose as the original. Same desk, same pen. But larger, wider frame, higher placement centered on the wall rather than set to the side. And below it, a nameplate that did not abbreviate. Claudette May Coleman, attorney, co-founder and equity partner, Meridian First Bank, 1994 to 2023. She built this. It was hung on a Saturday morning in late October, 3 weeks after the article ran. Zara came to see it. She was wearing paint-stained clothes. She had considered briefly wearing something else. She had decided against it, for the same reason she had decided against it on the morning of the Tuesday in September, when she drove 9 minutes across Atlanta with a canvas bag and a manila folder and walked into a lobby that did not want her there. Dignity is not a dress code. She stood in front of both portraits for a long time. The original and the new one. Her grandmother twice in oil paint, looking directly out of the frame with the expression that was not quite a smile and was not quite a challenge and was somehow both. Raymond Cross was there. He was not working. It was a Saturday, his day off, and he had come in specifically for this. He stood near the east wall with his hands in the pockets of his jacket, and he looked at the two portraits, and then at Zara. He nodded once. She nodded back. That was enough. She drove home. She parked on the street outside her building. She walked up the stairs. She unlocked her apartment door and stood in the doorway for a moment, smelling linseed oil and coffee and cedar. She went to the easel in the corner, the canvas she had started 3 weeks ago, the one with no commission. The one she had begun without knowing what it would be was still there, half finished, the underpainting dry and waiting. She looked at it for a long time. Then she picked up a brush. She began in the dark the way her grandmother had taught her, from the bottom up, starting with the roots. She painted until the light changed. Some people walk into rooms, and the room decides in the first 10 seconds that they don't belong. It happens in lobbies and boardrooms and classrooms and every ordinary space where one person gets to decide the worth of another. What those rooms never account for is the person who already knows their worth before they walk in, who carries it in a canvas bag, who signs their name in pencil, who does not change their clothes for anyone's comfort. Dignity is not something a room can grant, and it is not something a room can take away. If this story stayed with you, leave one word in the comments, the one that stayed. And if you want to be here for the next one, subscribe. The records are still remembering.